I botched it.
Hello? Does this work? Hi, I'm Izquieta from 5-4 Group. She said 4-5 Group, but it was actually 5-4 Group. I'm going to be talking to you guys about sticking with it. So I've been in the fashion business now for 15 years or so. I started my journey back in 2001. I was a senior at USC. Growing up in LA, I was born and raised in LA. I grew up like 10 minutes away from here. I went to USC as well. I was always super into fashion, and the one thing I was always obsessed with in life was clothes. And I was in New York for a week in August of 2001. I walked into a store called H&M. It was the first H&M in North America at the time. And I was just blown away by this concept of fast fashion. So I came back. I was in the entrepreneur program at USC. I wrote a feasibility analysis how fast fashion would destroy the American fashion retail market, because American fashion had been built more on classic styles as opposed to the European and the Asian style, where it was much more fast and much more just product on trend. So I started my journey, so just quickly, in 2002 when we launched 5-4. So my business plan in the second semester at USC was 5-4. And at the time I didn't really know what I was doing. I went in the yellow pages back then, those existed. And I looked up the biggest ad and saw how do you screen print shirts. So I screen printed some shirts, sold them to my friends, and the name of the brand was 5-4 essentially. And what 5-4 meant at the time was 5 minus 4 equals 1 equals one love. I was 21 years old, drunk college kid. You know, at the time it was cool. So, you know, when we launched in the traditional way. We reached out to stores, we contacted magazines to feature the product, and then when I graduated in May 2002, my business partner's parents and my parents both asked us, what are you going to do? And we said, oh, of course 5-4. And they're like, well, that's not a realistic thing, because you know, your business is nothing still, blah, blah, blah. You have to go get a real job. And we said, no, fuck it. We're going to go max out 7 credit cards. Went to a trade show called the Magic Show in August 2002, which was a fashion trade show in Las Vegas. And that's how we launched. And we launched with a booth, 7 credit cards. We're broke, 22 years old at this point. And, you know, we got into like 10 stores at the time. So for the next 2 years or so, we struggled. And it wasn't until 2005 where we got an angel investor from the apparel business to invest in the concept. And at the time, we really had nothing going on. And at that point, we were in like in 50 stores, but it was just t-shirts and sweatshirts. And, you know, but we were able to get enough funding to go out and create a real collection. And we manufactured product in China, Peru, and the US. And by the end of 2005, we were now in like 200 stores and created a full collection. And with the funding that we had gotten, we had went and recruited a real team, a real sales agency, et cetera, et cetera. So for the next 2 years or so, we grew in stores like Macy's, Nordstrom, Buckle, Fred Siegel, Atrium. At one point, at our peak, I think in 2007, 2008, in doing wholesale, we were in about 1,000 stores. When 2008 hit, you know, the recession hit pretty hard. And the way that clothing companies traditionally operate in wholesale is where you have a factor in order to ship goods out to third-party stores, and your bank factor basically advances you anywhere from 70 to 90% of the receivable. At the time, prior to the recession, about 90% of the invoices that we factored were approved. So it was fine, we're able to finance our business like that. When the recession hit, within 6 months, about only 10% of the invoices were getting factor approved. So we went from flying high, we had like 25 employees, we're doing $9 million that year in sales, to very quickly slumping down to like $3-4 million in sales in 2009, and really not knowing what to do. At the same time, we got pretty lucky where we created a JV that still exists to this day, where we created another brand called Young and Reckless, where we basically used our infrastructure, and it was a streetwear brand that was built off of a popular show on MTV called The Rob Dyrdek Fantasy Factory, and it was integrated into the show. So that really helped us in 2009 to kind of get through our financial woes, because the brand took off instantaneously, went from 0 to 10 million in 1 year. Meanwhile, we were still trying to figure out what to do with 5-4. So in 2009, a lot of big real estate companies like the Westfield Group and Simon Group and all that stuff, they were pretty much in desperation in terms of trying to figure out what the future was, because there was a bunch of stores that were closing. So what we did is we were able to leverage that and basically get 3 stores that they financed for us to launch in 3 Westfield stores. Now, very quickly we learned 3 things: that retail sucks. Secondly, men don't go shopping. Third, when they do go shopping, they don't know what they want. So for 2 years, we just kind of sat around, and then one day at our store at Century City Mall, I am friends with Robert Shapiro's son, and he had created this concept, or was involved with creating a concept called Shoe Dazzle. And he had a pop-up booth at the time with Kim Kardashian, who he brought to the table for the company, and he explained to us what they were doing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, what's interesting about a lot of these new concepts that were popping up at the time was that no one with actual apparel experience was involved with these concepts. So it was a lot of these people that were like disruptors that, came into the market and were more so outsiders. And at that point, I'd been in fashion business for 9-10 years, had gone to sourcing from China to Korea to India to US to Peru to Mexico, been over to China at that point like 30 times, and I really knew manufacturing. And I looked at the landscape and saw what existed out there, and going back to the 3 pain points that we had in the retail space itself was that men don't go shopping, and when they do go shopping, they don't know what they want. So quickly we concepted out a concept called the 5-4 Club, and we launched it in May 2012. And the idea is that for $60 a month, we would send you a package of clothing that we manufacture. So a lot of the concepts that existed out there were twofold. One were like more curated experiences, like a trunk club, where you receive stuff, you get to keep what you don't want, and you send it back. The biggest problem with men in fashion that we saw was that men didn't want choice, as opposed to girls that obviously want choice. And secondly, the other type of subscription model was where you would get charged a certain amount of money, and then you get choice as far as to what you pick. Again, it was counterintuitive to what we thought, was that men did not want choice. So, for instance, for $60 a month, you would receive 1 month a pair of jeans and a Henley, the next month a button-down and a sweatshirt, the next month a jacket and a t-shirt, and so forth. So on day 1 that we launched, we got 1,200 members, and we're like, oh shit, there's something special here. And at the time, we were still doing e-commerce, we still had to run 2 stores at the time, and still doing wholesale. After 18 months or so, we realized that so I'll quickly explain to you guys how the club works before I go into the other stuff. So first questions we ask you is you fill out a short style quiz to tell us about your style, and then your size and fit. So very simply, we ask you what kind of style you are: casual, forward, classic, or mixed. About 50% of the guys choose mixed, 20% choose classic and casual, then 10% pick forward. And very quickly, so these are 2 examples of types of packages that you'd get. And the clothing is comparable to that of a J. Crew or Gap, stylistically as well, since men don't get a choice. A lot of the clothing that we do is classic, so it's comparable in style to like Gap or Banana or J. Crew, but a lot more cooler and modern. And there's easy size changes, free shipping, cancel or pause anytime. So that's essentially how we launched, and for the next 18 months, we just kind of sat around, watched, and saw, because we didn't really know anything. So when we launched the site, we got 1,200 members, but we didn't even know where that data lived. So the next day, we had to export a CSV file, and it literally was a shit show. We hired some like shitty agency to create our website. We didn't know anything. We didn't even know how to do Facebook retargeting, anything. So for the next 18 months, we just kind of like learned and watched and sat, learned customer service, learned more importantly what the customer truly wanted. And then I would say end of 2013 is, we went from 3,000 members to now we have close to 80,000 members. And the biggest change that we did at that time, we started to really invest in advertising. We invested in things like Facebook, Google, YouTube, and affiliates and podcasts and all of the above. So very quickly, when it came to, I want to say 2015 or so, we always felt that subscription to us was more of a differentiator, but it wasn't going to be the ultimate thing. At the end of the day, fashion's still very driven by consumers buying stuff. And what we saw at the time was that there was this massive opportunity to create direct-to-consumer, fashion-forward, high-quality, accessibly price point brands. And the only brands that exist in the space were still from the big boys: Zara, ASOS, H&M, Topman. But if you think about it, men's is always a second priority for them. In the women's space, there's a ton of options from those 4 guys, plus hundreds of other people that are either offline, online, or both. So in 2015, we started to concept what was going to be phase 2 of 5-4 Group. Essentially was to create direct-to-consumer, male-focused brands. So July of 2016, we launched a brand called New Republic, New Republic by Mark McNary. So we partnered up with a high-end men's footwear designer named Mark McNary. And we created basically product that was retailing from $60 to $110, that if you go to a store would sell anywhere from $199 to $400. So for instance, we sell this Chelsea boot here for $99. It's real suede, real leather, real crepe. If you walk into a Barney's or even like a Cole Haan, it retails anywhere from $250 to $400. So that brand, we are able to leverage Mark's name and get a ton of free press and a ton of organic traffic to the site itself. So that brand went from, in 12 months, from 0 in sales, about $8 million in its first year, primarily driven by great quality product, great name behind it, and a great price point. And what's interesting is that the first 3 months of the brand that we launched, 90% of the transactions were done by 5-4 Club members, because as a 5-4 Club member, you get to 25% off and free shipping on our other brands. Coincidentally, starting in December of last year, we started to see a big shift where in the last 9-10 months or so, about 90% of the transactions are actually non-members. So we widened up our audience because it's a product that speaks to a fashionable guy, that we're creating the right product at the right time at the right price. In December, we launched an activewear brand called Grand AC. So it's basically fashion-forward activewear and athleisure at price points from $20 to $60. And then in July of 2017, we launched an eyewear brand called Izquieta. Think of it like high-quality frames for $65 to $85, very fashion-forward. So essentially what we've been doing here is setting up ourselves for essentially what is kind of phase 3 of 5-4 Group, which is 5-4 Man, which is our marketplace platform that we're going to be launching at the end of the year. Right now, if you wanted to purchase all the brands, you can go on 54club.com/shop, but it's kind of a broken experience. Each brand right now has also its own individual site: newrepublicman.com, grandac.com, Izquieta.com. What we're doing is we're going to be unifying everything onto one platform at the end of the year. And the idea is that for the shopping experience, we're actually going after a male customer that spends a high proportion of his disposable income on fashion. So it's actually the complete opposite of what 5-4 Club is. So the 5-4 Club guy, what we think is that guy is a guy that shops anywhere from 2 to 3 times a year, very off touch, wants things very simple, very lazy, very classic in terms of his styling. Fashion is not his life. For the guy that we're going after on 5-4 Man, basically fashion is a big part of his life. So he's shopping 8 to 10 times a year. He's going to Zara, he's going to ASOS, he's going to H&M, he's going to Topman. He's checking Instagram every day to see what's cool, what's hot. And if the average guy spends $500-$600 a year on clothing, this guy's probably spending $2,000 to $3,000 a year on clothing. Some guys spending $400 or $500 a month. So we're seeing it very early on with a lot of our consumers with the New Republic brand. These guys are buying, for instance, this Chelsea boot. There's guys, if you go on Instagram, that own 5-6 pairs every single color. So that's kind of the guy that we're going after with 5-4 Man. And what we're essentially doing is we're creating it into 4 personas. So essentially, the picture isn't here, but the first 2 personas are basically what a 5-4 club guy is. So think of guy 1 is like a J. Crew guy. Again, he's a 5-4 club guy, doesn't really shop much. Guy 2 is a guy that, you know, is shopping maybe 4 times a year. He'll do a little bit of mix and match from like a Zara to a J. Crew to Gap. Then guy 3 and 4, the guys that are more into fashion, obviously, that are very on trend, that are shopping, and all those guys that I mentioned. Explain to you how the club works. So one major improvement that we're actually doing for 2018 is that the average life cycle of a 5-4 club member is 8.5 months. And apart from financial being a reason for cancellation, the other biggest reason was that, hey, I like 5-4, I just have too many 5-4 clothes in my closet. So what we thought about was like, let's think about what's going to make the customer experience better. And now that we've launched 3 other brands, what we wanted to do is basically offer a more diverse product offering to the member. So starting in January of 2018, we're going to be sending members, for instance, a sweatpant and sweatshirt from Grand AC. Then February and March is similar to a typical 5-4 club month. In April, we're going to be sending a leather sneaker from New Republic and 3 no-show socks. Then 2 months of 5-4, 1 month of Grand AC, 2 months of 5-4, 1 month of Grand AC, 2 months of 5-4, 1 month of Grand AC. So we've done some initial polls and testing and talked to customers, and you know, for them, from the early innings, we're seeing that there's a lot of excitement, and we've actually tested this concept. So in July of 2017, we sent out around 5,000 of our members a Grand AC package without telling them, but we created very interesting content that was very compelling, that gave them a reason of why this is relevant. And it was one of the most well-received months that we've ever had, because it was something so different from what the guy got traditionally from 5-4. So going back to, again, a synopsis of 5-4 Man, it's going to be launching in December 2018. It's the home for New Republic, Grand AC, 5-4, and Oshenta. In 2018, we're going to be launching 2 other brands, one in the grooming space and then one in the sneaker space. The grooming brand is going to be all made in USA. It's going to be going after the basic men's closet, or the basic men's bathroom, like shampoo, body wash, face wash, shaving. And essentially we're going to average the customer base that we have now to be able to sell them more stuff. Then in the summer, we're going to be launching a sneaker brand that's all made in Portugal, 75 to 150. There's going to be a personalization aspect to it as well for premium markup. And we're launching with a pretty big influencer in the sneaker space as the face of the brand. So essentially what we're doing, like I said earlier, is we're creating these 4 personas. And based on that, we're going to personalize the shopping experience and what we decide to show you. So for instance, we're going to incentivize customers to take a quiz when they come to the site. What guy are you? And then ask you a bunch of other basic questions. And based on the style that you attract to yourself most, and the site will be custom tailored to you. We're also going to be creating content that basically speaks to these 4 personas as well. And that's just like a brief of kind of what the site is going to look like on mobile. So again, for 5-4 Man, for that experience, the main competitors would be a Zara, ASOS, H&M, Topman, going after a fashion-forward guy that shops 8 to 12 times a year, spends a large percentage of his income on fashion. And we're going to be launching a subscription element where we offer a yearly pass for, call it 19 to 20 bucks, free shipping, and a credit back for every purchase. So if you spend, say, 100 bucks, you're going to be getting $20 back in store credit 30 days later, kind of like Amex points, to go and shop on the platform. And that's really for us to give 30 days for returns exchanges, as well also to give us a reason to ping you back, like, hey, Joe, you have $25 in your 5-4 store. So essentially that's kind of like where things are. So the future of 5-4, basically, is to focus on existing brands and services, pursue offline opportunities where they make sense. So we recently launched a pop-up shop in West Hollywood for 6 months, more so experimental, to kind of be able to give consumers kind of the glimpse of what the future of 5.4 is, because a big stereotype of 5.4 is that 5.4 is a subscription service, and like the main thing that we always try to teach and inform people is that 5.4 is first and foremost a brand, and the club experience, it is a service, but 5.4 is the brand. And we look at ourselves as more as brand builders, we're not a technology company, we're not any of that stuff. We're a fashion company first and foremost, and we use e-commerce and technology as our form of distribution. So, I spoke on it before about the other categories that we're pursuing. Our core subscription business is going to be tackling men that basically don't shop, that want that curated experience, and then the e-commerce experience is going to be driven for guys that like to shop. And a lot of what our focus is in terms of marketing is driven on content. So I would say 3 years ago, we had no content team. Now we have 30 people in content. We have 3 producers, 4 videographers, 4 editors, 6 graphic designers, 3 photographers. And essentially, the way that we look at it in terms of how you market your brand, specifically in fashion, you have to think of it like you're literally a media company. Like you're pitching a movie, or you're pitching a TV show, or you're pitching an artist. And the way that we're creating content now, we've actually shifted a large percentage of our spend now from the traditional form of advertising, because counterintuitive to what kind of a lot of people here may think, I actually don't think I think spending money on Facebook and Google and all that stuff is actually the opposite of building a brand. Like, I can't think of a brand that was built by spending millions of dollars on Facebook. Sure, you may transact, but spending money on Facebook and Google and all this stuff doesn't really create brand value. Brand is driven by, in this day and age, by creating content and being able to speak to your consumer and addressing them in a way where they feel linked to your brand, whether it's through the personalities or the faces of the brand or the brand itself and the content that they create, that they curate for their consumers. So I think that really is the future of like what it is that we're going to be spending a lot of our marketing and dollars on in creating content. And essentially it's a lot cheaper to create content than to go spend it on Facebook or to go spend it on all these places. Bear in mind, we still do all those things, but I'd say in the last 2 quarters, it's gone down a lot. And obviously, as you guys know, Facebook has become like Park Avenue in terms of spending, so it's not cheap by any means anymore. In terms of my thoughts on the future of retail, like I said, content and curation is everything. Personalization, mobile focus, creating an offline strategy. So, going back to the pop-up shop that we created. So we created a pop-up shop in a popular coffee store called Alfred in West Hollywood. And what we noticed is that experience where consumers come for food, beverage, or whatever, that it created a very different experience in the shopping experience, because especially in LA, people just don't go shop on the street. It's not like New York, Chicago, San Fran, etc. People want some sort of experience. So when and if we do go back into retail, we're big believers that there needs to be some sort of experience linked to it. And we've talked to department stores about creating shop-in-shops that we control and that we run, but we're very adamant about making sure that there's some sort of experience and that it's just not a traditional shopping 2010 style, like go buy stuff, pick it, wear it, try it on, whatever. And obviously for guys, it's even much less than girls. Guys just don't like to go shopping in general. So there needs to be some sort of an experience. And lastly, in terms of the offline strategies, trying to figure out how, data comes into play. So with this pop-up shop, we've basically been testing ideas where we're seeing what kind of data and advertising we can drive towards the actual shop as well. And the overall market, as you've been seeing in fashion and in general, there's been a lot of consolidation, whether it's, guys like what you saw what the Walmart guys are doing or whatnot. It's just becoming a lot tougher for a brand that does wholesale to continue on like that. And then a brand that's direct to consumer. Obviously, the pain points are that I'd say 10 years ago when I looked at the retail space, I knew just in menswear, I knew maybe 30, 40 brands that did over $100 million. Today, there's very few brands that do that because there's hundreds of brands that do $1 to $10 million. So essentially, you're going into a marketplace where there's a lot of opportunity for the new entrepreneur, but at the same time, for the existing brand, it's a much crowded market. And then on top of that, when you're looking at things like media spending, I'd say that when we started to spend media between 2013 to 2015, our competition was more startups. So we're able to kind of, become the biggest in the space because the competition was smaller than us. So they always had less money. The problem is about, I would say 18 months ago, you started seeing that there was bigger people, like Macy's now spending a ton of their money, Dillard's, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. So when you go up against those guys, it's very challenging to be able to compete dollar to dollar with them. We've actually spoken with a few big department stores in terms of partnerships and trying to figure out if there's something that we can benefit off of their existing offline platform. I think from my conversations with a lot of these big boys is that they all want to do something. They're just all scared to do it. And I think that apart from maybe Nordstrom doing a good play with like a Hot Look, it's pretty safe to say that all their other investments in this kind of fashion tech space haven't been necessarily the best results. And they're all basically afraid to do something, but they're all dying to do something, but they're basically just, the way I compare it is that they're all like the Titanic and the Panama Canal, and they just can't move. But now it's like, shit, Amazon bought Whole Foods, Walmart, it's basically on a spending spree. What do we do? And none of them are going to pay the price that it is to pay someone. They're all looking for some sort of like technology to figure out if they can go buy that technology to integrate it into their offline or online platform. But until one of these guys does something apart from the two that I mentioned, I don't know, I just think that a lot of these guys are going to go down, obviously, and you see store closures and whatnot. So that's kind of the overall synopsis of 5-4 Group and where it's going. If there's any questions and answer them.
We have about 10 minutes for questions, folks. If you'll raise your hand, lady over there will walk up with the microphone.
Are you guys still doing wholesale now?
No, so we haven't done wholesale since 2013, but for 2018, we're actually exploring for the New Republic brand. Actually, sorry, we are doing wholesale. So for Grand AC, the activewear brand, we sell currently in 60 studios. So we're in All Berries boot camps, Rumble Boxing, Cycle House. And basically that came about because they contacted us. And what we noticed with the activewear space, it's a very physical touch thing for the consumer. Coincidentally, in our pop-up space, our activewear brand is the #1 selling brand there because the customer comes, touches and feels, and then goes and spends and buys like 8-10 things. For New Republic, we're looking at potentially a big opportunity with a department store, more so for customer acquisition. So it's profitable but very small, but we're looking at it if we can get into 200-300 stores, and the way that the product is created in terms of the design aesthetic, it's definitely going for a millennial guy. And we're going to bank, if we end up doing it, that guy's going to come to our site and purchase his second and third pair, and then we'd be able to sell them 5-4 and all the other stuff. But we look at that channel as more of a customer acquisition channel, not a wholesale strategy channel to create profit and all that stuff.
I was just going to ask, I didn't hear you mention Frank and Oak as like a competitor, but I saw they're doing a lot more like brick and mortar, leveraging brick and mortar retail. Just wondering if you're going to get back into that as part of your strategy going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's relevant. I think there's definitely an opportunity where we can probably create 10 to 15 stores across the country. We wouldn't do like a guide shot type of thing like a Bonobos does. I just don't believe in it. I still think that guys want to walk out, or people in general want to walk out with bags in their hand. It's just a thing. And if we do end up doing it, it'll probably be in the big markets because that's where 5-4 is the biggest. Like LA, Chicago, New York, San Fran, Dallas, Houston, DC, etc. It's not top of mind, but maybe in a year or two. I think once our brands mature more from an e-commerce perspective, it's worthwhile pursuing. But for now, our pop-up shop, it does well for the square footage, but it's a very isolated experience, and just doing that, it's basically you have to think like you're doing another business. Because to do an offline business is managing people, managing retail staff, it's very different from what we do online.
Hi. Do you also do private label?
No.
Okay.
I've been offered, but it's not worth our time.
We have time for 2 more questions. Raise your hand.
How willing is your brand to still do new tests? And do you feel like your marketing budgets get set and we know what to do? Or do you feel like you still have a culture of wanting to try new stuff? Like, how do you balance, it's not like you have endless budget. You talked about Facebook becoming more expensive. How do you think about new channels?
So we explore new stuff every day, and I think as Facebook got more expensive, we became even more open. So I think in 2014, 2015, early 2016, when it was fairly cheap, it was like, okay, cool, just keep spending on that. There's quantifiable metrics to all that stuff. But now, over the last 9-10 months or so, we've become more open just because it's become more expensive. I think if the opportunity is cheap, and by cheap being under 20 grand to be able to test something, and if it works, then we'll pursue it. For instance, we did something with the YouTube influencer. So we used to do stuff back in the day, then we stopped doing it. And then the CPA ended up being like unbelievable off one video. We had like a $18 CPA, and we acquired 500 guys. So we were like, oh shit, and we decided to give a small spend at it. So now it became relevant again. So we're looking at new stuff every day. It just depends on what it is and how quantifiable it is and if it can impact. And I think for subscription, it's one type of advertising or media spend. For e-commerce, it's a completely separate one. So it just depends on the channel, whether it's e-com or subscription. But yeah, we're definitely
Lori, you got a question off the side of the stage?
Yeah, Andres, just to wrap it up, so much of what we're going to be hearing about today is how e-commerce and content are really intertwined. And I'm wondering if you're looking at other content platforms that are emerging, like VR and AR and voice activation, and just some of these new technologies that are starting to be very influential.
I think it's still very early, so our approach to a lot of that stuff is let the bigger people do it and test it and see what their pains and their mistakes are and where they win. And one thing we are doing pretty heavily is chat, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are doing. So we're doing a lot of that, and that's actually played to be a really good engaging tool, at least for a transactional element. But I think it's still very early in terms of all those things like AR and VR and all that stuff.
More questions, anybody? Over there?
Yeah.
How big is international for you guys right now, and do you see that as a big growth area?
Yeah, so it's only about 2% of the business. So I'd say, so the room for expansion is there. So we just opened up the New Republic site to ship to 15 countries, and I think within the first, I think by this month, it's now 20% of the volume. So there's definitely a relevant play. And we're exploring an option for a license out of Mexico with a fashion conglomerate that wants to do online and offline.
How do you describe your brand in 3 adjectives?
Well, which brand? There's 4 of them.
Personal brand and
Personal, eccentric. That's it. In terms of the 5-4 brand, I would say it's adventurous, optimistic, and discover. So what we really try to push is that you're a discoverer, because essentially we're sending you new stuff every month that you don't have visibility of what you're getting. And a lot of the content that we create is around discovery and exploration. So we actually have this content strategy where we're shooting across the world now. So just in the last month, we did Mexico City, Paris, London, Stockholm, Antwerp, Copenhagen, New York. So we're trying to create this content that can speak to the consumer around the idea of travel. So we actually created a survey. If you had $1,000, what would you spend the money on? And we had 40,000 guys fill out this survey. And 30% of the guys said travel, 30% of the guys said experience, which is kind of the same thing. And about 15-20% of the guys said clothing, 10% said savings, and 10% was something else. But it goes to speak that this guy, the millennial guy, and you know, obviously you can read it in the reports and stuff, rather spend their disposable income on experiences. So what we're trying to do is really create that as like a core part of the soul of the brand, is being a discoverer. So that's the most important thing that we really try to push through our copy, through our content, through our photography, our video, et cetera, et cetera.
I just had a question about the content creation. So you mentioned that you're investing more now in creating content versus going through, you know, a Facebook or Instagram for ad spend. Do you think it's important that you have a matured customer base before you make that transition? Or do you think that that's something that even as a newer brand, you know, you can experiment with?
Yeah, I mean, so we go a lot by gut, and my gut is that that's the future, because if you look at what the most engaging brands are, the most engaging brands are the ones that are actually storytelling, and they're storytelling to like a crazy degree that was not told before, because you're fighting basically for consumer to go like this. So you have to be able to be in their face daily, sometimes hourly through Instagram story or whatever. But I think that the consumer today wants to resonate, wants to be able to connect with someone or something or a brand. And I just see that as the future. And obviously it's been going on forever, but today more so than ever, it's so much more relevant, because you just see, like, for instance, when we create engaging content, for instance, where we ping people to ask them a question or to participate, the level of engagement is insane. Like, for instance, my business partner did a proposal to his followers, and he has like 10,000 followers. 75. You have to run 75 miles in the month of October. Screenshot me your things daily. I'll send you a free Grand AC outfit. First day, he had 200 people that DM'd him. So that's 2% of his following, which is pretty engaging to go out of their way, run 5 miles, send them the picture. And so, for instance, I did something just yesterday where I said, yo, send me your 3 hottest shoes that you have. And I gave him the rules. I had so far about 150 people send me photos of their shoe collection, and basically then like praising 5'4". So I think it's little things like that that we do personally or through our brand that I think the consumer just wants to be able to connect. And I think if you're a new brand today, more so than anything, that needs to be your whole strategy. Because the only way to be different from everyone else is if you can strike a chord with the consumer emotionally. That's not going to come across in the carousel ad on Facebook or, you know, a search display. So I think that that's the most important thing going forward for all brands, especially brands built on the internet.
All right, we're going to wrap it up. Let's have a hand for Andres.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.